Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Here we have a special presentation today with Alta Language Services. We have two presenters. We have with us Nicole Tavares, who is the Language Access Advisor for Alta Language Services. And then we also have Stephanie Cork, who is their Executive Director for Interpreter Training. This is going to be a really unique presentation because Stephanie is going to give you sort of the high level of what their training program does and how it's different than some other training programs, and then they're going to dive into the actual platform and give you guys sort of a sneak peek of that. So I will let you guys take it away. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you everybody for coming. Nicole and I are really excited to present to you guys today about the path towards professionalism as a medical interpreter. I know a lot of you are already probably working as community interpreters. And if you've ever really thought, I'd love to be a professional interpreter, but I'm not sure where to get started, or even I'm already a professional medical interpreter, but I'd like to take my skills to the next level. At Alta, we have training for interpreters at every level, so we are excited to talk about the things that we can offer. Just to briefly introduce ourselves here, my name, again, is Stephanie. I've been an interpreter since 2011. I am nationally certified through the NBCMI and the CCHI, and I've worked as an interpreter trainer for many years as well. I've worked to develop the curriculum of this program, and I'm currently working as the executive director of our interpreter training department at Alta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole. Thank you guys all for being here. I'm so excited that we have such a good turnout. Sorry I don't have a backdrop, but welcome to my home. I've been working as a medical interpreter for about the last 10 years, and like a lot of people, I kind of just fell into interpreting. When I started out, I was never trained, and I made every single mistake that untrained interpreters make. And it wasn't really until I received proper training that I realized the difference that made in my interpreting, and more importantly, the difference that made for patients. So ever since then, I've been really passionate about training medical interpreters, and I'm one of the in-person trainers at Alta. So if any of you guys are Atlanta-based, I'll be teaching the next course, which is pending for May, pending the pandemic. So I'm really excited for you guys all for all of you guys to be here, and we're really excited to talk about this path towards professionalism. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about Alta, about what we do here at Alta, about limited English proficiency. This is a term that we're going to talk about a lot, so we're going to talk about what that means. About health disparities related to language and access to language. We're going to talk about the importance of training medical interpreters. And we're going to talk about the difference between qualified and certified, because that's a really important distinction to make. We're going to give you guys some tips on choosing an interpretation course, and then Stephanie is going to give you a virtual tour of our Alta training course. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the path towards certification. So Alta Language Services, we have about 30 years of experience as a full language service provider. We're an employee-owned company, and we're Atlanta-based. We do interpreter training at every level, and we're going to go into that further. We do translation, so document translation, voiceover work, that kind of thing. We also do interpretation. We have interpreters in person, over the phone, and through video. We do language proficiency testing for many corporations and many healthcare systems. And then we do language training for individuals and for groups. Okay, so a little bit of vocabulary, a little background, so we're all on the same page. The first thing we want to talk about is interpreters and translators. These terms are often used interchangeably in media and movies. They're often used incorrectly, so we want to make sure that we clarify that before we get started. So when we're talking throughout the presentation, we're going to be talking about interpreters. And interpreters are people that convey meaning in an oral format, so that are conveying in person or video or over the phone interpretation, but it's always going to be an oral format. Translators are people that convey meaning in a written text, so people that translate books or movie scripts. So when we talk about the medical field, an interpreter is somebody that will convey a treatment plan alongside a doctor in person a lot of the times, and a translator would be somebody that conveys the meaning in or somebody that would translate a consent form or something like that. Next is target language. So target language refers to the language that you're interpreting for. So there's always going to be two languages. We're making the assumption here that the first language is English, and the second language would be the language that you translate for or interpret for, pardon. So I'm a Spanish interpreter, so Spanish is my target language. Next is LEP, which stands for Limited English Proficient. That refers to anybody that speaks English less than very well. And that's a self-identification. That's someone that says, hey, I speak English less than very well. And this is a US Census definition. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more on the next slide.
Great. So one of the things that we want to highlight here also is just why Nicole and I chose medical interpretation, what drew us to want to become medical interpreters. I've always been very interested in healthcare and surgery and medicine, and I didn't really want to go to med school, but I really wanted to be able to be involved in the healthcare field in some way. And so medical interpretation is perfect for that. I also wanted to be able to use my Spanish every day as well. And so this is a beautiful combination of those two things. I really love that medical interpretation feels very new every day. You go into these appointments and you're learning new things all the time. You're with different people all the time. And another piece that I really love is that it's very rewarding. You get to work with people in these really definitive moments of their lives, really vulnerable moments of their lives, and it's such a gratifying thing to be able to see people be very relieved at the knowledge that they're going to be able to communicate well with their doctor. It's very meaningful. Nicole, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah, so I have very similar experience as Stephanie. It's a very meaningful and gratifying job, and it's something that it's a job that you go in to work every day, and you feel rewarded at the end of the day. So I really enjoyed my time working in the hospital as an interpreter. All right, so limited English proficiency. So like we said, this refers to anybody that speaks English less than very well. Here in the United States, 1 in 5 people speak a language other than English at home. And that amounts to 20 million people in the US that speak English less than very well. So these are 20 million people that need interpreters to access essential services. So these are our patients and our customers if you work outside of the medical field.
So you would think ideally that with that many people in need of interpreters that we would have a ton of interpreters available.
Yeah, but that's not the case. There's a shortage of medical interpreters, or interpreters in general, here in the United States. For example, a state like California has a large percentage of the population that's limited English proficient. So 1.7 million people speak limited or no English in California. And to serve that population of people, there are only about 1,400 interpreters that are certified. And that's data that is recent as of this month. And this is also true for other languages, or for languages of lesser diffusion, languages that are less commonly spoken. For example, here's a case of Kwanhoba. There's a Kwanhoba speaker that was waiting for her asylum hearing, and her asylum hearing kept on getting pushed back, and it got pushed back for a year while they awaited interpreter that was available. And the same is true in the medical field. I've worked in hospitals where we didn't have interpreters available for mom, for example. We had to wait weeks and weeks in order to be able to get a mom interpreter to communicate with their patients, with our patients about their plan of care.
So what happens when a patient goes to the doctor and they don't have an interpreter? So the next thing that we want to talk about is how limited English proficiency is related with health disparities. So a health disparity, if you think about, so one of the things that we'll do in the class, if you guys end up taking our class, is that we talk about how to break down words into pieces and to analyze those pieces so that you can kind of determine a meaning. And so if we do it with this word, pair or par in disparities, think about like a pair of socks, right? So you have two socks that are the same, and dis means not. So if you are looking at this word together, it means not the same or not equal. So a health disparity is something that is preventable. It's a difference in care that a patient may receive. So it can have to do with the disease that they have, with injury or violence, different opportunities that they might have to be able to reach the best level of health that they can. So what can sometimes happen is that if a patient does not speak English, that they experience a disparity like not really understanding very well what their medical diagnosis is, not really understanding what their discharge instructions are, not understanding well how to take their medication. And as a result of this, if a doctor is communicating in English with a patient who speaks English less than very well, then you have an increased risk of things like medical errors or misdiagnosis. Going back to the medication piece, there was a hospital who saw a patient without an interpreter. They sent the patient home with a prescription. They filled the prescription, picked it up, and on the bottle it said, take once a day. In Spanish, once is spelled the same, or in English, once is spelled the same as the Spanish word once, which means 11. And so the patient took 11 of a pill instead of 1. So really serious drug complications can occur if the information is not relayed in a way that the patient can understand. Patients who speak English less than very well tend to stay in the hospital for longer. And then another thing that happens is something called up triaging. So if a doctor can't speak with a patient, they can't ask, really basic intake questions. A lot of times what can happen is that they end up doing something called up triaging, which means that they order a wide series of tests to be able to try and diagnose what is happening. This is really costly both to the healthcare system and to the patient, and a lot of those things can be avoided just by having a conversation, asking questions. Patients with limited English proficiency also experience a decreased access to care, and maybe most shockingly, the higher rates of intubation. So
Really scary.
Scary stuff, yeah. So the next thing that we want to talk about is, if we are looking at this many problems that can occur as a result of not being able to communicate well, then what kind of legislation exists to prevent these problems? And there have been quite a number of pieces of legislation that interpreters and language access programs have pointed to throughout the years. Civil Rights Act, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, for example, is one of them. There's an executive order under Bill Clinton that clarifies a bit more, but the most comprehensive piece of legislation and the most recent piece of legislation is something called Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is also known as Obamacare. Most of you probably know that, but this is a piece of legislation that exists under Obamacare. And what it says is that if an organization, a hospital, clinic, facility receives federal funding in any way. So for example, if they see a patient who has Medicare, for example, or Medicaid, then the hospital is required to provide a qualified medical interpreter for a patient who's limited English proficient. And so one of the things that it explicitly does, and this is fairly new legislation, is that it explicitly prohibits the use of minors. So children are not allowed to interpret. Anyone over under the age of 18. Children are not allowed to interpret for their friends or family members. And it also states that no friends or family members should be used. A patient can specify that they would like to use a friend or family member. Usually it involves like paperwork that releases the hospital of liability, but the law says that, barring certain circumstances, that friends and family members shouldn't be used, and that untrained bilingual staff also should not be used. So if we have, for example, a nurse who is a Russian speaker, even if she's super familiar with the terminology, even if she's, fully bilingual in both Russian and English, this isn't the same as being a trained interpreter. It's not the same as that qualification stipulation. So let's talk about why.
So like Stephanie mentioned, one of the things with the ACA is eliminating untrained staff, eliminating untrained people that work as interpreters. And that's because studies have found that interpreters that are untrained commit errors that can have clinical consequence. And some of those errors are the ones that are listed here. So adding or substituting words or phrases, so using a word that's incorrect or just substituting it all together. Inserting personal opinions, that's a big one. That's one of the things that we talk about in our course is to really restrain yourself as an interpreter and avoid adding any information besides the information that's been provided. Using words or phrases that don't exist. This happens commonly. This is also called false fluency, when you kind of make up a word or you use a word in English when you're supposed to be interpreting into a different language. And omitting words or phrases. So one of the things that's really important when you're working as an interpreter is to be faithful to the message. And that's really important in healthcare, because you want the patient to hear the plan of care like they would from the doctor if they were English speaking.
Exactly. And I think Nicole and I have actually talked about this quite a bit, about the first time that she and I both did like a medical interpretation assignment. And both of us felt at the beginning like we were perfectly suited and prepared for facilitation of that conversation. And both of us left being like, oh my gosh, I did a terrible thing just now. So it's very common to go into something thinking that you're equipped with what you need, and then to realize in the middle of it that perhaps some training would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the inverse is true for trained interpreters. So having trained interpreters improves the quality of care for patients, as higher rates of patient satisfaction. So obviously, if a patient can understand and communicate with their provider and really understand their plan of care, they're going to have higher rates of patient satisfaction. Fewer errors in communication, that makes sense, right? Reduced disparities, and this goes back to the list of disparities that Stephanie mentioned earlier. Improved clinical outcomes. So studies have shown that having access to interpreters decreases rates of readmission, decreases the length of stay in hospitals, and improves other clinical outcomes as well. And this last one, reduce financial costs to the organization. This one's a bit counterintuitive, because you think, hey, interpreters cost money, right? We have to get paid. We're not working for free. So how does this reduce the cost to the organization? And it's because of a couple of things. One, it decreases readmission rates, like I mentioned a second ago, and it decreases the length of stay in the hospital, like I also mentioned. And one thing that Stephanie mentioned earlier was up triaging. So up triaging is when a physician can't communicate with the patient. Sometimes what they'll do, the study found that this phenomenon that they'll do is they'll go ahead and order a bunch of tests. So they can't communicate, so they'll order a bunch of diagnostic tests in order to get the information that they need. So that has a big financial cost. That's called the language barrier premium. So interpreters reduce a lot of these financial costs to organizations, and at the same time facilitate effective communication between providers and patients.
These studies are really important because, like Nicole said, the intuitive option is to think, of course, having interpreters is going to end up being more expensive, but the inverse is actually true.
All right, qualified versus certified. Okay, so this is really important here. This is something that we definitely want you guys to we want to drive home to you guys. So these are terms, qualified and certified. These are terms that are often used interchangeably, but they're completely different. They're like comparing apples and oranges. So when we talk about a qualified interpreter, this goes back to what we talked about earlier with the ACA. This is a legal definition. So the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, deemed, so federal law says that in order for an interpreter to be qualified, they have to demonstrate language proficiency, they have to demonstrate their interpretation skills, they have to demonstrate knowledge of medical terminology, and they have to demonstrate knowledge of interpreter ethics. So this is what you'll get after completing a 40-hour course like ours. You'll be deemed a qualified medical interpreter. So when we talk about certified, this is a professional definition. So this is when an interpreter has demonstrated competency and has been issued a certification by one of the national certifying bodies. So this is a big professional milestone. There's only a couple thousand interpreters in the country that are certified medical interpreters. So when we think about qualified versus certified, qualified is kind of like step one. That's getting trained and being able to demonstrate proficiency to work as an interpreter. Being a certified certified medical interpreter, this is a different professional milestone. So this is the next step, and it shows your peers and your potential employers that you really take medical interpreting seriously, and that this is part of your career. This is your career that you've chosen.
So going into the path for professional medical interpreters, and again, we're kind of harping on this because it is so important, and these terms get used interchangeably incorrectly really frequently. So like, you know, I used to do hiring for interpreters at my company, and if somebody said, oh, I'd love to apply, I'm a translator, initially I thought, are you really a translator? Are you an interpreter? I want you to know what you're called. And then if they said they were certified, then I would look at their resume. If they were in fact certified, I would get really excited. If they were not certified and they were qualified, which is this other level we'll talk about here, then it was disappointing to see, mostly because we want you guys, once you start down this path, to be able to talk correctly about the credential that you have, to be informed about that. So when you want to start down the path to become a professional interpreter, a medical interpreter, you start with this bilingual foundation at least, and then you move from that into taking and passing a 40-hour medical interpretation course. So this is what we offer at Alta. It's what we're about to give you a tour of. Once you pass and earn your certificate from your medical interpretation course, then you can say, okay, I'm a qualified interpreter. You meet all of these requirements under qualified interpreter if you take Alta's class. So you prove your language proficiency, you prove your actual oral interpretation skills between both languages, or more if you have more. You prove your knowledge of medical terminology with one of the final exams that you take, as well as your knowledge of interpretation ethics. So if you take and pass Alta's 40-hour course, you're covered for the 4 stipulations under Obamacare to be a qualified interpreter. And you can use that certificate to apply for jobs all over. Different employers will have different requirements. So some might say, okay, great, a 40-hour certificate is great, that's what we're looking for. Or they might want you to take this next step. So you can, after you're qualified, you can apply for certification. You can take certification exams through one of 2 organizations. One is called the NBCMI, the other is the CCHI. We're going to talk about that a bit more too. Once you have completed that application, you take a written exam. Once you pass that written exam, you'll take an oral exam. If you pass all of those, well, you'll take an oral exam if it's available in your language. Again, something we'll get to. And then once you've done this entire process, then you can say, okay, I am nationally certified. I've passed my NBCMI exam or my CCHI exam. So make sure that when you start down this path, or when you complete certain steps, that when you talk about your credentials, that you're using the correct terminology. Okay, so when we are talking about choosing a medical interpretation course, we have some tips for you to think about when you're looking at what the program does. So asking, you know, what kind of things am I going to be learning in this program? What are the key components of it? What does the program do to evaluate their interpreters? What does their final exam process look like? Do the final exams really demonstrate a skill set that's important to demonstrate? Do they evaluate the things that fall under that qualified definition? Another thing to think about is, does this training match my learning style? So are you the kind of person who needs to read out of a book? Do you need to be talking to someone face to face? Do you need something that you can just kind of watch whenever you have time? There are a lot of different things that can affect there are different training styles or learning styles, and you want to make sure that those things align. Another thing is, does it work with my schedule? Am I going to be able to do that? I know all of our schedules are on pause right now. And so the online course is something that you can do at any time. We can definitely talk about the schedule of how our program works. Another thing to ask is, does it have a medical focus? Nicole and I were talking about this earlier, that like the medical field is so vast, and the vocabulary and the knowledge of all of that stuff is just, it feels very unwieldy. And so you want a training program that is really going to prepare you for facilitating medical conversations, which is you know, a completely different thing from just a regular conversation. Next, who developed the program? So you, the recommendation is that you would look for a program that was created and developed by trained interpreters, not only trained interpreters, but interpreters who have had kind of a depth of experience in the interpretation field, in the medical interpretation field, so that you know that that curriculum comes from a basis of really having been there. And we talked a little bit about the format of the online training and being able to contact the instructor. So, and I'll show you guys the course here in a minute, but first we want to introduce you to our team.
So yeah, this is us. So me, that's me on the top. You guys already know everything you need to know about me. There's nothing more interesting to learn. Right below me is Gerardo. Gerardo is one of the curriculum developers, and he worked at a level 1 trauma center. He's been an interpreter for about 10 years, and he's worked at every level of language services in the medical fields. Right below Gerardo is Kate, and Kate is a dually certified medical interpreter, so she has both of her national certifications, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But Kate has worked at a level 1 trauma center as well. She works at a prominent children's hospital here in Atlanta. And if you guys end up taking our course online, our BBIH course, you'll see her in a lot of our the lessons. And Stephanie right here, yeah, you see, you know Stephanie. The biggest thing to know with our team is, unless you want to add anything, Stephanie.
No, I think we're good.
So the biggest thing to know with our team is that if you reach out to us because you're interested in the course or you have any questions about medical interpretation, you're going to reach us. So you're going to reach all of us. We're all medical interpreters, and we're all qualified to answer any of your questions related to medical interpreting and related to the course or any of our educational offerings.
Okay. So let's get into our actual course. The 40-hour course that we offer at Alta is called Breaking Boundaries in Healthcare. It's a good fit for you if you speak 2 or more languages fluently, if you want to work as a professional medical interpreter, even if you already have experience as, you know, an interpreter in another field, it's still a good fit for you. And the last thing that we ask is that you feel comfortable navigating the internet and using a computer. It seems like a silly thing to add, but it is very crucial to, you know, enjoying the class and being successful. The training was developed by a team of nationally certified interpreters. There are several of us that have worked in the past and currently on the development of this program. One thing that we're really proud of is that we own this program. This is a program that is owned and developed and designed by Alta. And so if there's anything that we ever really want to change or update, we can just go into the course and put in new curriculum. We don't have to ask permission from anybody. And so for that reason, I think we have like a really current view of what the healthcare interpreter industry looks like. And it's very relevant. So the way that the course works, you get 16 weeks of access to the course material. You can start anytime. You could start today, you could start next month, you could start next year, whenever works for you, and you get access to that curriculum immediately. I'm going to show you what the pre-recorded stuff looks like and what the live sessions look like. So we do live sessions 3 times a week. We have these recorded lectures and animated slides that you can do on your own time. We're going to let you also see the digital course books that we offer. We have bilingual medical terminology glossaries. In fact, you know what? As I keep talking about this, why don't I just go ahead and show you? So this is what the course looks like when you get logged in. So we have a little video on how to get started, a little course introduction, some participant policies that we ask you to sign. The first thing I want to click in and show you are your student resources. So here we have a list of a couple of different things. You have a student role play workbook and a student course book. And actually, I have the course book pulled up here. So you'll get a digital copy of this textbook. And you have access to this textbook whenever you are signed into the class. For the entire 16 weeks, you can pull it up anytime you like. We also have hard copies that we can ship if you prefer that. It's an extra cost, but we are trying to keep our costs low for students, so we want to provide this free digital copy here. So we have a student workbook as well. It's full of role plays, and I can click into it to give you guys kind of a view of it. So this is a role play workbook that is written in English. All of our students who speak multiple different languages use this. So you can use it in practice with another student. You can use it in practice with a friend or family member, or we also have coaches available to you that you can sign up to work with. That is an add-on because it's something that you get, one-on-one attention for. But it is something that is available to you. The next thing I want to show you is this 16-week study guide. So because you guys have 16 weeks, we've basically broken out each week with recommendations of what we would have you study within that time frame. Of course, you don't have to follow this. It is just something that we made because a couple of our students were like, I can't be trusted to just do this every week. Like, you need to give me more structure. And so we created this for that purpose, to give people kind of a better idea of how to divide out the lessons and the practice and all of that.
Yeah, that's really good for students like me that would be like 15 weeks and a half in. And I'm like, do all the lessons
in 3 days. Oh my God. Okay, so which, by the way, if that happens, we have an extension option. It's much more, well, it's a fraction of the cost of the whole class, but we have extensions if you happen to run out of time. Okay, so the next thing to bring your attention to is this medical terminology glossary. I have the French one pulled up here, but you guys take a look and see if you can find your language here. We have them available in these languages. So this is an example of the musculoskeletal page. This is the musculoskeletal page of the French glossary. So you can take a look at that. And again, we have these available in the languages listed here. Okay, so we talked about the study guide, the textbooks, the glossaries. The next thing that I want to show you is just kind of a little preview of what a medical chapter looks like. So let's go ahead and click into here. This is a cardiovascular system chapter. We're going to start it in the middle of the lesson. This isn't the beginning. So if it seems like it's missing a beginning, that's why. It's there. It's just not what we're going to be looking at right now.
And just to clarify for everyone, this is an actual lesson. Everything that Stephanie has shown you till now are just additional resources that that we put together for you guys. So just additional stuff for you guys to have and for you to look over.
Exactly. Yeah. So here we go. Oh, I should mention this too. So Nicole and I were going over this earlier. The sound that you will hear from this lesson is my speaker picking up my microphone on my computer. So the sound is not, for the webinar, going to sound really great, but it sounds better when you're actually in the class.
Just learned that red blood cells contain hemoglobin that helps to transport oxygen. Iron is necessary for the creation of hemoglobin. Therefore, when there's not enough iron, there's not enough hemoglobin. And when there's not enough hemoglobin, the blood is not capable of providing the body with a sufficient amount of oxygen. A patient with iron deficiency anemia may experience fatigue, weakness, pale skin, shortness of breath, dizziness, or even unusual cravings for non-nutritive substances like clay, ice, or ashes. This is called pica. At first, the symptoms may be mild, but worsen as the anemia worsens.
Okay, so this is an example of one of the pre-recorded lectures. You can watch this at any time. You could do it at 3 in the morning. You can do it in your jammies. And then at the end of every medical lesson, we have a practice video. These practice videos are in English. We have a couple that are language specific. These at the end of the medical lessons are in English, and you're going to practice interpreting into your target language. So for funsies if you guys want to go ahead and try interpreting along with this video.
Hello, I'm Dr. Brian.
So you take this time to interpret into the target language.
As you know, we drew some blood from your baby when she was still in the hospital and sent it out for testing. These tests help us diagnose diseases at a very early age.
Okay, so this is an example of something that you might encounter in a medical chapter of BBIH, which BBIH, by the way, is the acronym that we use for breaking boundaries in healthcare, BBIH. Okay, so.
And one quick thing, the purpose of these medical lessons is really just to expose you to conditions, to medical problems, to vocabulary. It's just really so people that haven't really worked in the medical field before can become familiarized with the things that are going to be interpreting. It's not crucial for you to learn every condition in and out, but it is important for you to have a basic understanding of these conditions when you're interpreting, because it's going to be a lot easier for you to interpret effectively if you have that background.
I have a video actually that addresses exactly that, so that's perfect. Yeah, we don't want you to look at that and be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to remember about hemoglobin and iron and oxygen. We're not hoping that you graduate this course as a doctor. We just want you guys to have, I'll show you in a second, a framework for understanding. So, okay, so we've shown you a medical lesson with a practice video in English where you're interpreting into your target language. We also have about 3 per language listed here of practice videos. So go ahead and take a second and see if you can find your language. And I will show you what one of them looks like. So we're jumping in the middle here too.
يبدو ضعيف القوة ومتعجبا بعد أن يلعب كرة القدم. هل هذا طبيعي؟
If you are an Arabic speaker, you could practice interpreting into English now.
Not all children have the same asthma symptoms, and these symptoms can vary from episode to episode in the same child.
Okay. All right, so this is an example of one of the practice videos that would be available to you in the class. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you is, what? Go ahead and close that out. So the next thing that we're going to show you is one of the like theory centric classes that we teach. So we have our longest chapter in the course is on code of ethics. And we're going to pull up a video from this code of ethics piece to actually illustrate the point that Nicole was just making.
So we've been talking about long-term memory and short-term memory, and something that I think is important
It's a little choppy.
here is that we're studying medical information.
Let's see if I can start it from the beginning.
So we've been talking about long-term memory and short-term memory, and something
I wonder.
important to mention here is that we're studying medical information for a reason. When we learn about the cardiovascular system, when we learn about veins and arteries and the heart,
Okay, so
works and how the blood moves through the body.
I'm going to go ahead and pause it. I think my computer is overloaded right now because I have a lot of things pulled up to be able to show you guys in the webinar as well. Oh gosh, this is quite a thing to pause on. Let's move right away from that picture of my face. But we do have all of these like pre-recorded lectures. There's one more that I want to show you, and I hope that it will work with what's going on with my computer right now. But there's another lesson that I want to show you guys where you can see kind of what Kate's involvement looks like. So give me 1 second to get that pulled up. Hold on, bear with me, please. All right. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. So we'll go back to the main page for BBIH, and then we'll go down to almost one of the last chapters, which is a chapter on culture. Right, here we go.
So we've talked about culture as being kind of an iceberg. Some things are visible above the surface, and some things, the majority of things, are not visible or invisible below the surface. So we would like to present you with a model of culture that has 6 dimensions. The idea of giving you this cultural framework or model is to try and help you have language to explain all the things that are underneath the surface of this iceberg metaphor. So there are 6 dimensions in this cultural framework. We will talk about all of them. But before we get into that, I want to kind of dive into what a dimension represents. It's very easy for us to instinctively think that my cultural preference is correct and good and right. We ascribe this moral quality to it. So to illustrate this,
I'm sure none of us are guilty of that. None of us have ever.
I love that
been
lesson.
guilty
One of my favorites.
of thinking you were the only right person in a cultural difference. Let me see now that let me see if I can get this video to work one more time. Again, I think it's just because I had a bunch of things pulled up on my computer.
So we've been talking about long-term memory and short-term memory.
All right. Well, we will we'll give it a shot another day, maybe. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to show you guys is what one of the quizzes look like. I do feel comfortable showing you guys the exact questions on one of the quizzes because they're really designed as learning checks. We don't really count them towards your final grade. We do count your final written and your final oral exams towards your final grade. And so the reason that I want to show you this is that this quiz looks a lot like what the final written exam looks like. So there are things that you'll do with matching or multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank. So if anyone knows what tachy means, if anyone can think about what that means, it means rapid or fast, like tachycardia. So you would fill out all of your answers here and then come to the bottom and click finish attempt. So this is what you could expect of the final exam, the final written exam, which is one piece of the final exam.
One last thing, Stephanie. I thought you were stepping away from there. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to remind you about office hours.
Yes. Okay. So everything that we've looked at so far is stuff that you can do on your own time, anytime during those 16 weeks. But we know that online learning can be very isolating. And so we really want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to talk to a teacher live during the week and ask questions about anything that you're not clear about. So we do hold office hours 3 times a week. And if you end up joining the class, then you'll be able to click into office hours under my courses. We do live sessions on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And when you click into this, you'll be able to see a button that'll say join meeting. But we also record them. So if for some reason you can't come, right now we have high attendance because people are not very busy.
People are just craving some face-to-face.
Yeah, they just want to talk to somebody. So we do record them and we post them. As you can see, there are a ton of recordings here. A lot of times we end up doing interpretation practice. So we talk about the kind of things that we practice that day. Another thing that we talk about, this is an ethical lesson that we did. So you can see all of the students that have joined this session. That's what these sessions look like. So again, these are 3 times a week. I teach one of them. My coworker Gerardo, who you saw the picture of, he teaches another one. So these are some things that are available to you throughout the class. Now, at the end of the course, the next thing that we want to show you, or the next thing that we want to talk about, one of the most frequently asked questions that we get is, what does the final exam process look like? So, can you guys, Nicole, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Looks good.
So, all right. So the written assessment looks like the quiz that I just showed you. We're going to ask questions only in English. It will examine your theoretical knowledge of interpretation. So your understanding of ethics, your understanding of the medical information. Again, nothing super crazy, but we want to test your medical understanding, as well as, you know, legislation in the US, the healthcare system, that kind of thing. So that's what we're looking at with the written assessment. You have to score 70% out of 100 to pass that. And then we have an oral assessment, which is done over the phone. You're going to be interpreting back and forth between an English-speaking doctor and a patient who speaks your target language. And so you'll be facilitating this medical conversation between the two of them. So while the written assessment really kind of evaluates your theoretical understanding, the oral assessment shows us that you actually can do the skill of interpretation. It's a practical exam. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Again, it's done over the phone. And that is our 40-hour course. So once you get this certificate, you can use it to either apply for work or to work towards that next step of national certification or both. So you're done with your 40-hour training. So let's talk about national certification.
So national certification, that would be your next step. After you've completed your 40-hour training, your next step towards professionalism is that national certification. And there are 2 certifying bodies here in the United States, and they're both considered to be equivalent. The first one is the National Board of Certification for Medical Interpreters. The other one is the Certification Commission for Healthcare Interpreters. And the main reason someone will choose one certifying body over the other is because of language. So as you see here, the NBCMI, so the National Board, is available for speakers of Spanish, Russian, Korean, Vietnamese, Cantonese, and Mandarin, whereas the CCHI is available for speakers of Spanish, Mandarin, and Arabic. So if you don't speak any of these languages, there's one other thing that you have available. For the NBCMI, which is the National Board here on the left side, you can take the written exam, and the National Board will provide you with a letter indicating that you've passed that written portion of the certification. And for the CCHI, what they do is that they give you this credential. It's called the Core CHI, which shows that you've passed the language neutral part of the certification. So you passed the written part of the exam, so you passed the knowledge portion. And we're going to talk about that I think in the next slide, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, kind of.
Oh, next slide. So let's go through this first. For the requirements for certification. So the requirements are really straightforward. You have to be 18 years old. You have to have a high school diploma or equivalent. You have to complete a 40-hour medical interpretation course. It can be one like BBIH. And then you have to complete language proficiency in both English and in the target language. This is where a lot of people kind of have trouble, because sometimes it's difficult to demonstrate this if you've been completely educated in the United States, or if you were completely educated, if you had all your formal education in a different country. It's difficult to show one over the other. The great thing about Alta's course is that we meet all of those requirements, all the last 3. So our certificate satisfies the 40-hour interpreter training, of course, and then it also meets the requirement for language proficiency in English and the language requirement for the target language, and that's because of the way that testing is done at Alta.
Right.
So if you take our courses, oh, go ahead, Steph.
I was just going to say the oral exam it's not possible to pass our oral exam unless you have proficiency in English and the target language. So when one of the certifying bodies sees a certificate from Alta, they know not only have you had this written piece, that covers the, the knowledge of the end of the medical interpreter training. But you also have this like oral exam that's really robust that you've had to pass. So it proves all three of those things at once. Sorry,
and this is something that we've also heard from healthcare systems. Healthcare systems that hire interpreters that have been trained at Alta know that our Alta certificate carries weight because of the way that we do testing. Our certificate means that interpreters are not only trained, but they've also been tested to demonstrate their proficiency in interpreting.
Right. Another thing that we should clarify here is that the proficiency that we're proving is not just that your ability to speak English or your ability to speak your other language. The final oral exam that we give will prove that you are actually a skilled interpreter in both of those languages, which is the thing that we're working to develop throughout the whole class. And so this is why it means so much to organizations when they're looking to hire. They're not just looking for your ability to speak both of your languages, they're looking for that capacity to interpret between them. And so that's what this certificate represents.
Oh, that's a great point. So this is the slide I was referring to, the steps towards certification. So the first step is to apply. So choose your certification bodies, choose what body you want to get certified through, or you can choose both, like Stephanie has. And then you're going to go ahead and apply. And the application process is just really gathering all of the documents that show that you've met the prerequisites, that you're 18 years old, so your ID, that you've graduated your high school diploma or your equivalent, and then your certificate from your 40-hour course. If you didn't take a certificate through Alta, if you didn't take our course, then you would have to demonstrate that language proficiency. So once you gather all those documents, you're going to go ahead and apply. Once your application has been approved, then you're going to go ahead and get scheduled for the written assessment. And the written assessment is very similar. Well, it kind of like the process mirrors our process. So the written assessment is going to test you for the knowledge, your skills and abilities to be able to perform as an interpreter. And that written assessment is completely done in English. So that's step one. Once you've passed, or step two, pardon. Once you've passed the written assessment, then your next step is to take the oral assessment. And the oral assessment is going to be in English and in your target language, and it's going to be an interpretation assessment. And it's a couple of scenarios, about an hour and a half long, of interpreting different medical scenarios. So once you've passed the oral assessment, it takes a couple weeks, you'll get your certification. You'll get your certification number and your certification, your certificate of certification.
Yeah. So if you have been watching this whole webinar and you've thought, okay, I've done my 40-hour training, I really just want to learn more about national certification, that is the information that is available. We also at Alta have developed a prep course, which you can take after you've taken our 40-hour training if you'd like, but it's more designed for people who took a 40-hour training a long time ago. They're going into their national oral exams and they're just intimidated and they'd like some structured guided practice. So the prep course is really just designed for people who are between the 40-hour training and this national certification level for them to just get some more structure to their practice so they can go into their exams with more confidence. So go ahead, Nicole.
No, I was just going to say, like, when I started working as a medical interpreter, and I don't know if you have the same experience, I feel like the whole process of certification was totally mystified. And it really is a much more straightforward process than what you would kind of think based on what you hear from different people. So the steps are pretty straightforward. If you're nervous about the exam, which is, there's a lot of test anxiety associated to that, but we have this course available if you're feeling anxious, but the process itself is pretty straightforward. And if you've taken our course and you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for, to like walk you through this process.
Right. Okay, so let's say that you have completed your national certification exams. You're a CMI or a CHI, certified medical interpreter or certified healthcare interpreter. After you do that, you have to keep your credential up by doing continuing education units. Ooh, Nicole, I'm realizing we have 8 minutes. So we're going to go through these little pieces pretty quickly.
So the CCH, oh, go ahead. So the continuing education is what you have to do to maintain your certification, just like you would have to maintain any professional license. The CCHI requires for you to do 32 hours of continuing education training every 4 years. And then 4 of those have to be performance-based training, and Stephanie's going to talk to you about that here shortly. MBCMI requires 30 hours of approved training within 5 years. This seems like a little, but like I'm fast approaching my certification. I don't think I've reached it. So don't do like me. Don't wait until the last minute. Stay on top of your continuing education units, and we're going to talk about how you can do that.
Yeah, so you can find these all over. Alta has CEUs available as well. So a lot of times we'll get people who say, you know what, I didn't really have a problem finding my regular CEUs, but this performance-based piece, I don't have any idea what to do. So we do have something called consecutive interpretation coaching. This is the thing that we talked about with the 40-hour course. If you want to be paired with a professional interpreter in your language to practice interpreting back and forth between Cantonese and English, for example. So you can do that for the 40-hour course, but also if you are a CHI and you're looking to satisfy that CEU requirement, this is approved through the CHI for the performance-based CEU requirement. So the way this works is we just get you scheduled. The interpreter coach calls you at your scheduled time, you work through it, and then if it's for CHI, then we give you a certificate. We also have continuing education units that are online and on demand, so you can check out with our online platform with our website, and then you can get access to these to stream. So we have a recording, we have a language neutral continuing education unit. It's on psychiatric interviews. This presentation is by a psychologist, a psychiatrist rather, excuse me, and she's talking about how she analyzes language to come to a diagnosis and how pivotal a good interpreter is for her when she's working with LEP patients. We also have another language neutral program. It's called Scripts for Sticky Situations. So if you've ever thought, I know I need to intervene, but I don't know how to say it in a way that's not going to make anybody angry, for example, that's what that webinar is about. And then we have 2 that are specifically for Spanish interpreters. One is on ambiguity. So if I say, look at the dog with one eye, does that mean the dog has one eye, or does that mean that I need to cover one eye? And how do you interpret something when it has 2 meanings, especially if that is impossible to replicate in the other language? And then the last one is on profanity. So those are the CEUs that we have available online. The last thing that we wanted, one of the last things that we wanted to talk about is that we are very happy to be able to provide a discount code for you guys if you are interested in the 40-hour course. This is for the 40-hour course. You can go to our website. It's learn.altaling.com. Caroline, I'm hoping we can maybe send that out at some point. But Boost 75 will get you $75 off. The online course is $650, so this will bring it down to $575. If you have any questions, or if there's anything else that we can clarify for you, or anything we can do for you, this is our contact information. It's our email address and phone number. I'll leave that up for a little bit longer, so you guys can copy that down if you need to. And then the last thing is just that we have time for questions.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for this really interesting presentation. And yeah, we can definitely send out the information to all the participants here on the discount code, and then also the contact information too, so that they can submit any questions. Let me look here to see if we have any questions from the chat real quick. And we had a couple. Second, sorry. There we go. How much is it to get a second target language qualification?
That's a great question. So our course is taught in English. We have these other resources that we showed you that are available in the other languages. And the cost of the course, which is the $650 or the $575 for you guys, includes your final written exam and your final oral exam. Now, if you speak a third language and you'd like to test in that language, it's $100 more for you to take a test, and that oral test. So let's say you speak French and Haitian Creole. So you would pick your stronger language first, test in your stronger language first. Written assessment passed, oral assessment you pass in French, for example. And then you sign up with the extra $100 and you pass your Haitian Creole exam as well. In that case, you would get 2 certificates, one saying you're qualified in Haitian Creole and the other saying that you're qualified in French.
Great, that's good. That's great to know. So let me just make sure we have answered most of the questions. There's a little bit too many, I think, to go into every single one. Somebody asked about your languages. So is Burmese one of them that you guys have considered adding, or is it? I know you guys are probably thinking about this often and engaging like what languages to add to your exams and that kind of thing. So someone asked about Burmese.
So Burmese is one of the languages that we do have, and actually let me go back to the screen to show you. So Burmese is one of the languages. So the stipulation that we have above all is that we have to be able to test you. So it is available to speakers of 42 different languages, and I can show you what the list of the languages is. But with Burmese, we do have resources for you. You can sign up for the class. We have this medical terminology glossary here. We also have this practice video here. We have a couple of different practice videos. We have the option for you to work one-on-one with a Burmese interpretation coach. Again, that's an add-on, but she's brilliant. She's a professional Burmese interpreter, really, really bright, and a good teacher. And then you take your final exam in Burmese. So if you look at this is our website here. The 42 languages are listed here, and Burmese is one.
Awesome.
I'm very happy to say that.
Yeah, definitely. I have one more question I'll do because it's already top of the hour, so we should start to wrap up. But can the exams at the end done be online?
The written exam is done on the computer. The oral exam is done on the phone. I know our testing department is in the process of working to develop video testing. It's not something that's available yet. So the only option we currently have for oral exams is a phone option. I understand that question because I have anxiety about exams over the phone too. And I took our exam. When I first got hired, actually, our testing department executive director was like, take it. And I was like, what? I was so nervous because I was brand new, and it worked out fine, thankfully. But I didn't have any trouble with the sound. My evaluator spoke very clearly. So I understand the anxiety of a phone exam, but I think that our phone exam you would find that it's fine.
That's good to know. Yeah, there's always a little bit of anxiety around
Right.
virtual exams, well, exams in general, right? Great. Well, I think I will wrap it up unless you guys have any last words for the group.
No, we're just. I think we're grateful that you guys have spent some of your quarantine time with us. We hope, that you are intrigued by the class. We'd love to have you join us. It is kind of exhausting to hear people say, like, make the most of this time, and you just want to, like,
process everything that's happening.
Yeah,
it's
process.
hard, because
on the couch, whichever one, right? But like, if you are looking for something to fill your time, it's something that you can do right now. So we would love to have you if you can. Oh, I do want, Caroline, I'm sorry, one last thing to mention.
Yeah, go ahead.
We do know that our students are understandably, like, a lot of them are in, really serious financial difficulty right now. A lot of them have lost their jobs. We have a payment plan option.
Oh,
where
good to know.
Oh yeah, great thing.
So yeah, so you can start for $200, which with this discount it would be $125. And then we divide that $450 remainder into 3 more payments every month. So it would be 125, 150, 150, 150. We have students who finish before they finish the class, before they finish making the payments. That's completely fine. Of course, the payments have to be made, but we will still issue you a certificate if you pass your exams before the end of the payment plan dates.
Okay, wow, that's great to know for sure. Yeah, it is a difficult time for a lot of people. So that's definitely good to know. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been really informative. And I will send any more questions that popped up your way. And thank you all of the interpreters out there who hopped on. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll be in touch. Great.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.